That's the problem that Arne Slot, his coaching staff, are having, is sorting out these small little details that now have been so magnified in our conversations, in the media's conversations, all the former players' conversations of why, if you spend all this money, haven't you got it right? And right now, I think the devil's in the details on both sides of the ball for Arne Slot to try to figure out.
Arsenal, for the first time I can think of, they're setting the agenda without being the champion. And I think that's really interesting. I'd love you to expand a bit on that. But also, there is this narrative, hashtag content. We're in the content minds here, right? We're churning stuff out. But like, there's the narrative of they are unwatchable. They're an unwatchable team. They're the kind of team that only a fan could love. And even then, I'm struggling to find Arsenal fans that are loving it. All I'm finding is Arsenal fans bitching and pissing and moaning about other fans saying how little they want to watch Arsenal. That's what other fans are supposed to do. And that's something you've got to suck up when you're kind of an ugly team. No Chelsea fan of the Mourinho era would ever care about this conversation.
100%.
Because Arsenal's whole identity has been, but we're beautiful. We're a beautiful team.
Micah will sit on the couch and watch Manchester United with me, but the other boys will only consume on highlights on FOTMob, and they'll TikTok and Instagram, and they'll watch clips and all that stuff because they're not really interested in the teams anymore. They're interested in the players. And so a lot of these, like when you watch these highlight reels that are being pushed and, you know, start having this crazy momentum behind it, I think that's where you're finding a new generation of fan that's graduating into, hey, I want to buy a jersey of this guy.
Hi everybody, it's the Week in the Tackle podcast, the podcast where we get together on a weekly basis and tackle things in the world of football that we thought were interesting. I'm Tom Rennie, alongside me is MLS legend, top soccer broadcaster, and man with a forehead who makes Harry Maguire look normal looking. It is Mr. Bruyne Dunny Dunseth. Hey buddy, you all right?
Renzo, you know what happens? Every once in a while I need a haircut. And once I get to that stage where the flippity floppity comes over, before one day inevitably that I join the balds, it goes flat brim day. And today is one of those flat brim days where the hair, you know, well, you knew what it was like back in the day.
No.
when you had a full head of hair and you woke up in the morning and it was going all over the place and you're like, I can't even try to control this. This is not one of those days I'm willing to put up a fight. Today is not the day I'm willing to put up a fight. So until this afternoon, flat brim it is.
No, it's good. I mean, look, I think that I've taken being bald with dignity and grace, unlike Landon Donovan, who, of course, is gluing on an 11-year-old's hair to their own head. Like, if you're going to be someone who glues the hair on, which is obviously pitiful, but if you are going to do that, maybe have an age-appropriate hairline. Like, he seems to have stolen the hair of an 11-year-old. Like, it's weird. Why not just get an age-inappropriate hat like Dunny has got? That's what I would do.
Flat brim. Flat brims work.
It's one for the kids, though, isn't it? That's quite a young person's hat.
I don't like the ones that, like, you know, when I got to Boston, I was 19 turning 20, and I got there and everyone was wearing corduroys, everyone was wearing flannels. It looked like a Hollister ad everywhere I turned. And then people had these hats on and they were so tight and they're so bent into their eyes. But there was an odd thing as well. They were chewing on their hats, like it was frayed on the front of the hat. And it was so dumb and it drove me absolutely bonkers. But then again, I was the kid wearing like Jordan 1s with baggy jeans and a big old hoodie sweatshirt on and either a hat backwards or a flat brim going forward. So like that was my first context of like, oh, hey, by the way, I'm not in Southern California anymore. I've just walked into Boston and the first thing I do is go to an ice cream place. And I was like, hey, the guy goes, hey, brother, you want any Jimmy's? And I was like, well, Jimmy's doesn't. No, you're not asking me if I want condoms, right? And I was like, no, I'll just do sprinkle. He goes, brother, Jimmy's, sprinkles, same fucking thing. Sorry, Tim. And that was my first like foray into a different cultural language bank, along with the clothing lines being completely different and outside the mainstream, where I had to buy like nice shoes and you couldn't get in with jeans anywhere. You had to have slacks and had to have collared shirts. And it was just counterculture to everything I'd grown up with. So that was my early days experience of Boston University or University of Boston.
I have a similar story to that, which is how I learned the other meaning of what a reach around is, but we've got no time for it now.
While you were ordering ice cream? That's odd, man. That's odd.
No, something was being served. Anyway, let's get to the football this weekend. A few stories. It was a some would say, of content. Anyway, let's get to... Do we beat that maybe? Sorry, Tim.
Let's plug that. Let's not plug that one.
You couldn't plug it. That was the problem. Anyway, let's get to the football this weekend. Liverpool are not back, baby. Of the game against Frankfurt in midweek, we were like, oh, it's quite good.
Yeah.
Maybe they've turned it around. Maybe those were isolated incidents. They go into Brentford at the weekend, and like I watched Brentford on Monday, and we'll talk about that a little bit later because I want to talk about the chaos that's happening at West Ham and the fact I've headbutted a few walls this week. Which is why my mic doesn't work because I threw it against the wall in pure rage, having seen that team sheet. But like they didn't seem prepared for the Brentford game at all. And we did the Man United game a few weeks ago. One thing you don't do against Brentford, play a high line at the G-Tech. It's exactly what they did. The second goal was ludicrous. Konate was never going to catch Sharda, and they're very good at balls over the top and through the hole. So why you would do that, I don't know. There are this Coyote long throw, which we'll delve into a bit more because I want to get more on you on that. But from you on that, but like it's incredible. They didn't seem to have a defense against it, and like having to take off Florian Wirtz for Joe Gomez, like. All the Liverpool problems that they were kind of papering over in those opening weeks seem to have come to roost very, very quickly here. What's your view on it, Dunny?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was going through some of my social media stuff, and one of the things I was tagged in was a conversation we had about Liverpool in the first 3 or 4 matches of the season. And I was kind of using a similar analogy or conversation with Tottenham Hotspur and Thomas Frank, and in that these are two teams that haven't hit their potential, that are in the infancy of the evolution of either a whole bunch of new players and departures, or when regards to Spurs, more of a new identity of the way that Thomas Frank wants to play his football and what he's asking his team to do. But it was a similar conversation in that good teams with good mentalities figure out ways to turn losses to ties, ties to wins, right? And so from losing 3 points to getting a point to manufacturing a way to get a full 3 points, even when you feel like structurally you're not playing well, maybe you're indecisive, maybe there's a lack of familiarity of the way that the teams are playing, or at least the standards of certain individual players, that you can figure out ways to sort it out. And I thought, in particular, I think we were coming off the Arsenal game, and that was the moment where I was like, hey, man, these are the elite two teams that we've seen so far, at least that we're kind of predicting right now. All due respect to Manchester City as they're figuring out what they're trying to do. But with the competitive nature of the Premier League, there's going to be some tough moments. And by the way, it's kind of weird, right? Like we could go from absolutely hammering Manchester United and Ruben Amorim for all the right reasons to now trying to figure out what Arne Slot and Liverpool are doing in real time on the backside. And again, you talk about the loss of goal. I think for me, again, Luis Diaz is such a massive presence that's lost on that left-hand side. Not that it can't be replicated, but it'll just look different. It'll feel different. I think having a Diogo Jota unavailable for the passing before the start of preseason becomes another element of an impact player off the bench that knows exactly what he's capable of doing. And then in real time, whether you talk about Wirtz, you talk about Ekitike, you talk about Alexander Isak, not even talking about Kirkes, not even talking about Frimpong, just thinking about then in the midfield and the outside right back position, and plugging and playing really good players like Szoboszlai. You got to play him, but the question is, what position are you going to play him? And if you play him on that hybrid of a tucked in right side, then how does that open up your back line? There's such a weird trickle down effect that's happening. And then we just talk about confidence. So for all of these things that I was speaking positively to after the first 4 or 5 games of the season, now we're in a moment where that pendulum has swung so drastically to the opposite side, where now we're poking holes through tactics, we're poking holes through signings, we're poking holes through performances. And it was weird to see the spotlight so heavily focused on Florian Wirtz, that this was a Florian Wirtz problem. It's not that Florian Wirtz has hit the notes that we expected. I think in this system, he's more of a complementary piece as opposed to an outlier the way he was at Bayer Leverkusen. But now, price tag conversation, similar. If it has so many different vibes to the way Darwin Nunez conversation was, the way the Paul Pogba conversation was when he showed up at Manchester United. So he's going to have to work through that pressure. But now you've got Andy Robertson versus Kirkes. You've got whoever at right back versus Frimpong, which was the same conversation we were having, saying if you're going to re-sign Mo Salah as that out and out difference maker on that right hand side, who's going to play behind him? And now maybe, just maybe, we're recognizing some of the difficulties that Trent Alexander-Arnold had in that position in certain moments, which we talked about his defensive frailty. So in all of these, we're going to broad stroke, but what I'm really focused is there's these minuscule moments. It's proactive versus reactive. It's decision making with and without the ball. And within all of these moments, there's not a lot of difference. And we saw that against Arsenal in the beginning of the season. And now we're seeing a negative aspect where it seems like there's this rushing wave of pressure defensively that they find themselves under. And we continue to think about the good old days where maybe we should start thinking about the present. And I think that's the problem that Arne Slot, his coaching staff are having, is sorting out these small little details that now have been so magnified in our conversations, in the media's conversations, all the former players' conversations of why, if you spent all this money, haven't you got it right? And right now, I think the devil's in the details on both sides of the ball for Arne Slot to try to figure out.
Yeah, I think a lot of that's really interesting, and I think that the transfer window this summer is weird, and
Yeah.
it's weird because they didn't need to do this. They didn't need this much investment and revolution from what was already the Premier League champions. And there's two bits of this, and we'll do Arsenal a little bit later. But I think the Premier League champions usually set the agenda, and I do think it's quite interesting Liverpool are not setting the agenda for the way that teams are playing and other teams are set up. So I do think that's part of it. They seem to be preparing Liverpool for a Premier League that doesn't currently exist, which I think is quite interesting in terms of their investment. But also, like, if this was a team that wasn't Liverpool and they weren't at the top of the Premier League and this was a Wolves or it was an Everton or something and they did this sort of investment, and we can go back to West Ham summer a couple of years ago under that Wally Tim Steidten. When you bring in this many people at the same time, there needs to be joined up thinking. And I think when you look at this Liverpool team, what's lacking? There is no cover for that back line in central midfield. Loads of brilliant players. But was Ryan Gravenberch ever a proper number six or a proper defensive midfielder? Or has he always been a bit box to box? It's an interesting question there. Has he been as good this season as last? He was great at the start of the Slot era, but has that sort of fallen away? There's no one else who can play there. And then we knew Alexander-Arnold was going for a long, long time. And they brought in Frimpong, who's a wing-back. And you can convert a wing-back into full-back. Absolutely. It's not like rocket science. It's not teaching a child to do a Picasso. It's doable. But I'm not sure they want them to do that. And then Conor Bradley's a good player. He's a good player. But is he, again, this is very, very, very top level. Are we expecting him to be as good as Ben White or whomever Arsenal have in those positions? Or expect him to be good as like Ryan Aït-Nouri, who's going to be doing it for City, or Kyle Walker in their legendary days, whatever, right? These guys. And I think that's too much to ask. And you add that to Konate and Van Dijk, who have never been a great pair for me, but certainly not a good pair on the halfway line. You add that to Milos Kerkez, who is not doing well. He is struggling right now to make a Liverpool player of himself. And maybe he only worked in that Bournemouth system. Maybe it'll take 2 years for him to be their left back. Who knows? But like, it's that joined up thinking of, if this wasn't Liverpool who we expect to get things right, I think we would be saying, and we are sort of saying it, but not as much, that was a bad window. It was a bad window because you did not address issues you have, and you've bought a lot of lovely little sweets. But it's the Ekatike Isak thing. They didn't need Ekatike and Isak. And when they've got Ekatike in, because they didn't think they'd get Isak, they then get Isak as well, and it creates another problem to go with those other problems. Whereas if you'd spent the Isak money on, apparently there are other defenders in the world than Mark Gay, and a right back who's actually right back, maybe they'd be in a better place. I don't know. What do you think to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things at play right now immediately. Obviously, Alisson's injury. I think they probably thought that Leone could be serviceable in moments throughout the course of the year and develop into a center back that could be worthy of a Liverpool elite center back. To your point about the high line, if you can get out, and this is just me as a center back, a former center back watching Konate and Virgil van Dijk, if you can get out of their reach, you can cause them problems. And the speed, the athleticism, the intelligence, all the player profile attributes that we're always talking about become that much more difficult to deal with, especially in a league that's so powerful, that's so transition driven, that is just so reliable on, yeah, we can play through you and we can open up the lines and we can find the shadows, or you know what, we can play a ball back to a center back or an outside back and just whip one around the corner and, you know, let the hounds fly. And so there's, to your point about Kerkez is certainly a Premier League player, certainly a Premier League player. But with the way that the team is breaking down defensively, and we also do the optics, right? The optics are Virgil van Dijk's giving him a bollocking every single game for one reason or another. And where I would, and this is coming from a former player's perspective. What I wish we had the insight is to understand what the training looks like every single day. Because for Arne Slot to be so absolute that Kirkez is his starting left back, I just wonder about the previous relationships with Andy Robertson and Virgil van Dijk when I'm trying to like subtly work through what's happening here. Because again, there's certain things that I see as a former player, thinking back to my time, and I see glimpses, right? I see moments, and I'm thinking to myself, does he need to have a go at him right now? Did he need to really like get under and like really dig him out? And there's moments where I'm watching the dynamic on that left-hand side of the fence, and I'm thinking, he didn't really have to do that. Why is he doing that? So then it then brings into the familiarity, the time spent, the success he had with Andy Robertson, the fact that Arne Slot continues to make this kind of like 55, 60, 65th minute kind of substitution, or even in the first half where he feels like Kirkez is getting overwhelmed. There's moments where I'm thinking to myself, he doesn't want to lose him psychologically, so he's got to protect him. But at the same time, do you need to protect him or give him as many minutes as possible when you have Andy Robertson, who's been such a great servant on that left-hand side? Or what's happening behind the sines? Is it injury? Is it fatigue? Is it the psychology of competition, like a real competition for a guy that's trying to win your spot? Was that competition? What's the psyche of both players? Like, hey, I brought in to compete. This is my position. No, it's your position. How do I win this back? Like, I'm thinking about all of these things. So, and with Frimpong, a player that is extraordinarily talented. But again, the adaptation process and the physicality that the Premier League brings each and every match is different to the Bundesliga, where on a weekly basis, maybe you're coming up against, Bayern Munich, or you're coming up against Borussia Dortmund. And then at that point, you are considered the team that's going to take the game to everybody else. So yeah, all of these things are really, really fascinating. I feel though we're kind of ignoring the elephant in the room, and the elephant in the room is always when we're talking about defensively, what's Liverpool missing? We're talking about center backs. Like that's what everybody is alluding to over and over and over. Just nobody wants to say it. Nobody wants to say like, hey, by the way, we think you can upgrade from Konate. Hey, by the way, we don't really feel like you needed to redo the deal with Virgil van Dijk. You could have gone out. If you plan to spend all of this money, why didn't you go and spend that money on an elite center back that's in that 24 years of age category, that has played in multiple countries, that has Champions League experience, that is that next generation of players, similar to when we were talking about Upamecano and we were talking about Konate potentially leaving the Bundesliga and going to the Premier League. So again, through all of these, it's moments, right? They're just moments that aren't going correct for Liverpool. But in that macro picture, we're having conversations of, man, if you spent all this money, why didn't you buy an elite center back? That's what it feels like, what it really comes down to.
I also think as well, it's worth moving on to the Arsenal point here, who are top of the table at the moment. And again, it's something I keep on thinking. It's almost like Liverpool didn't see the writing on the wall. A lot of teams didn't see the writing on the wall. This is not the Premier League of 5 years ago, where it was Guardiola disciples, and it's Graham Potter at Brighton, it's Ange Postecoglou getting the job at Tottenham. It's all these kind of football tiki-taka managers. And those that have seen the writing on the wall have gone with the ultra-physicality of what Arsenal are bringing. Brentford won the game at the weekend because they know what's up. They know what time it is. They know what's happening in the Premier League this season. And Liverpool seem to be playing in a different world. And City against Villa the weekend, you can see that to a point. They're playing in a sort of different world. Whereas Arsenal, for the first time I can think of, they're setting the agenda without being the champion. And I think that's really interesting. I'd love you to expand a bit on that. But also, there is this narrative, hashtag content. We're in the content minds here, right? We're churning stuff out. But like, there's the narrative of they are unwatchable. They're an unwatchable team. They're the kind of team that only a fan could love. And even then, I'm struggling to find Arsenal fans that are loving it. All I'm finding is Arsenal fans bitching and pissing and moaning about other fans saying how little they want to watch Arsenal. That's what other fans are supposed to do. And that's something you've got to suck up when you're kind of an ugly team. No Chelsea fan of the Mourinho era would ever care about this conversation.
100%.
Because whole identity has been, but we're beautiful. We're a beautiful team. I always tell you my story, which I won't do the whole thing now because I might get in trouble. But it's my old friend who used to be like, mate, like, we don't play football, yeah. We play Arsenal ball. And there's a whole generation of fans sort of brought up on that. My generation, millennial Arsenal fans, right? People sort of brought up on that. And this is very much the George Graham. Anyone who's older, the Arsenal fans who are over 45 to 60, they remember this. 1-0 to the Arsenal, George Graham, Bold, Adams, Dixon, Winterburn, David Seaman. F you. Sorry, Tim. That's what Arsenal were like. And then they became this Wenger thing, which dominated the next 20 years. This is sort of even more hard to watch than George Graham. It is unwatchable. The Fulham game was awful that I worked on in terms of a neutral, I don't care who wins. The Palace game this weekend, which I had one eye on, was awful. And again, they don't care about that if you're Arsenal. But like, they're playing for free kicks. They're playing for corners. They're not trying to score from open play. They rough you up. They don't care. They get the win. They move on. What do you make to that? And the fact that they are setting the agenda and some Arsenal fans are sort of, to my mind, I speak to a lot of them. I mean, it's not all of them, of course, but like some are struggling to deal with the reality of the Arteta world.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to come in it from a different angle because I totally understand where you're coming from. Where I think we're at in the modern game is we're so used to so much possession, right? We're so used to these teams that have so much style and substance with their possession and triangle passing and drawing players in, switching to the opposite side and variation of service, getting down to the end line, early swinging balls. These players with so much intelligence and technical ability, and then so much precision and power and speed and athleticism and all of those things. The one thing I feel like that's missing in the conversation about Arsenal and is that when we talk about the idea that they're playing for corners and set pieces, I actually want to push back on that because when I watch them play, I think we're doing a disservice to their attacking phase of play. I feel like we're almost missing out on the conversation defensively of how many times the opponent has to knock down crosses, that has to deal with headers, that has to push something to safety at the, like hooking a ball out for a corner because, there's two players sitting at the back post and it's such helter skelter. Now it might not be the way Arsenal fans are used to watching their team. That we talk so much about the affection of the Arsene Wenger years and the way that they played, and everybody on that team had such like a feel, a panache, like a style. When I look at this Arsenal team, I agree. There's a grittiness to it. I don't like Arsenal. In fact, when Manchester United's playing Arsenal, I hate Arsenal. I can't stand Arsenal, but I respect it because there is a housery, I think, sorry, Tim, to the way that they play, to the style. They've got this tough tackling, grabbing, oh yeah, like that. Like there's always a combativeness when they're on the field. And I think that's what irritates a lot of teams because with that combativeness, they play. Here in the United States, I played with Oscar Pereira, head coach of Orlando City. I played with him in New England. I played with him in Dallas, and I've always had an affection for his mentality, his grittiness, like the guy that you want to go to battle. I remember one time in practice, somebody said something, and Oscar just went, knocked his ass out right there. And I was like, whoa, okay, cool. It's a different, that Colombian nature, that like me versus you, I'm gonna win always. Always was the thing that kind of put him into that elite category as a player, and that put him into elite category as a manager. I had this like epiphany the other day as I was watching Arsenal and I was watching him on the side. I was watching Mikel Arteta on the sidelines with his coaching staff and Gabriel Heinze and everybody involved. And I realized that there's a combativeness that's being presented to the players. And then the players have then molded themselves and their style of play into the manager. And I think we forget that Arteta was such an excellent player. I think you're seeing, and this is the way that he wants his team to be played. So as I think we're doing a disservice to how good of a team they really are. And especially in a moment where Madueke's out and Odegaard's out, and I don't even know what Kai Havertz's role would look like if he does get healthy. Obviously, Gabby Jesus is it's really at the end of his time at Arsenal with all of the injuries that he suffered. But with this summer, it was a statement of intent. And I think when you look at the team, in particular, Calafiori, Gabriel, Saliba, Timber, thinking about Pierre Nketiah, the Ecuadorian player that hasn't shown anything at all because he was
Yeah.
so late as an addition coming from Bayer Leverkusen. You've got Christian Mosquera in the back as well. All of a sudden, you've got 5 to 6 like hammers, like legit hammers across the back line. And that doesn't even include like Miles Skelly and everybody, all of the youngsters coming through the system. So I just think we're in a new phase of like reappraising how we're trying to verbalize what Arsenal does well. Because going back to the set pieces and the corners and the long throws and all that stuff, I just think people forget that's the purpose of the game. And in the attacking phase of play, if you're forcing defenders to give up the amount of set piece opportunities and corners and all of these issues, Arsenal's the first team in the modern game that has figured out a way to capitalize on it. And it's ugly. It's not fun. It's not, it's not aesthetically the way we're talking about the modern game. And yet here they are top of the table and no one wants to with them. Sorry, Tim.
How much do you think that this Arsenal team will be beloved by American sports fans? And the reason I ask you that is because you use words there like, boring and awful to watch and unwatchable. And that makes me think of American sports because like it's all like you get a play and then like 25 minutes and you get dancers and t-shirts and whatnot. You get a play and then you'll go for a drink or whatever. Like they are very much, and the Premier League is becoming, and I'm not the biggest fan of it. I don't hate it so much. I'm kind of working through it, but like it's very much becoming, right, there is a dead ball situation. We've got 5 minutes here to set this up. And you've seen it with even the way Brentford played against Liverpool the weekend and the way Everton play and the way Sunderland play to a degree and a few other teams. Like, do you think they'll have an appeal to the American sports fan who are watching football for the first time? Because to us, that's the wrong word, but like to those that love the beautiful game, our Ray Hudson type friends, they'd be like, oh, Christ, I hate this. Whereas if I was a big fan of like, thinking of a team, the Cowboys or the Jets or whatever, or the Commanders, I might be like, yeah, this makes sense to me. We have a play, we reset. We have a play, we reset. And that's how we win.
Yeah, I've never thought of it that way. I have to wrap my head around that for a while because I think we're having kids and watching the way that it was funny. We were just having this conversation down in Las Vegas with my son Luca's team. Because they were playing against kids from Las Vegas, they were playing kids from Southern California, from Northern California, and you can just tell culturally that a lot of the players that he was playing against, and even on the sideline, like these teams were like Pachuca and Chivas and like who else was in there? Tecos, and they were wearing like club teams from Mexico. Or they were Surf or whatever. My son's team was Avalanche, but you could see all of a sudden these players, it wasn't athleticism. There was like instinctual understanding of moments with the ball. And these kids are like 8 and 9 years old. And it was just a difference. Like our coach with a Mexican background was kind of like trying to tell the parents that, hey, this is obviously the level that we want to play at. This is the top bracket in the division for their age group. My son's playing up in age. There's a couple kids that are a little bit younger. But the conversation was the kids that they just played against are so focused every single weekend of sitting on the couch with their parents, watching their team. And it doesn't matter. It could be Liga MX in Mexico. It could be the Bundesliga. It could be Spain watching El Clasico. We were talking about El Clasico, and Andres, the coach, is like, oh, you're talking about America Chivas? They don't play this weekend. And they're like, no, dude, El Clasico, bro. Like Real Madrid at the Bernabeu against Barcelona. Like, but that's it just shows you like the psyche and the difference. So like we were kind of like working all through this. And then I was randomly like, hey, like, who do you support? And like, do your kids watch? And, getting into this like deeper theoretical conversation, because as I've told you, Micah will sit on the couch and watch Manchester United with me, but the other boys will only consume on highlights on FOTMob, and they'll TikTok and Instagram, and they'll watch clips and all that stuff because they're not really interested in the teams anymore. They're interested in the players. And so a lot of these, like when you watch these highlight reels that are being pushed and start having this crazy momentum behind it, I think that's where you're finding a new generation of fan that's graduating into, hey, I want to buy a jersey of this guy. Because I think I told you the Lewandowski story. My son was a big Lewandowski guy when he was at Bayern Munich. And when he went to Barcelona, he ended up wanting the Barcelona jersey. He didn't want to watch Bayern Munich anymore. He just wanted to follow Lewandowski. And that was the first was like, oh, okay, like there's not a lot of loyalty here to teams. So to your point, I can't tell you how many times like Andrew Williams, former producer on Counterattack on SiriusXM FC, he became a Chelsea fan because of Didier Drogba.
Yeah.
And thinking about how that works. So this new generation of fan, I'm it's a great question because at the end of the day, we're all kind of front runners to a certain extent. We all want to have that egotistical kind of theoretical, like, yeah, man, I'd rather play my way and lose than play your way and play direct and figure out a way just to scrum a goal in. So yeah, I gotta bite into that a
Yeah.
little bit more from an American sports fan. But I feel like right now it's still Liverpool, Man City, probably dominating the scene of kind of new fans based on how exciting their style of play has been for the last couple of
Yeah.
years.
I do wonder if there's some study about like if you're an NFL fan and that's the kind of thing you like, whether you pick Arsenal because they do great plays. I don't know. It's just
Yeah,
a theory.
interesting.
Something I'll keep watching and see if we can talk to more people about it. Listen, a couple of other stories I want to get to today before we're out of time, and I just want to tell you about my Friday night.
Oh boy,
So Monday last week, I went to West Ham against Brentford. And
you didn't want to.
I've worked in the Premier League for 13, 14 years, right? And of course, I've been a West Ham fan for like 30 years. But I've sat through like the Derby team that got 11 points, the Southampton team last season, Ipswich last season, some really, really bad teams. And I'm struggling right now to think of a worse performance than I've seen than West Ham against Brentford on Monday. And I got there a little bit late. And the fullbacks are on the wrong side. And I was a bit like, oh, okay, maybe it's after a corner or something, and they've just got to go back to their positions. After a minute, you're like, oh, okay. So that's been deen on purpose, which I've only really seen like Bayern Munich do because they're Bayern Munich. Sorry, Tim. Whereas West Ham aren't that. And then like this is the pace and power league. We've been talking about it for half an hour now.
Yeah.
It's pace, it's power. It's pace, it's power, 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 power. And he picked Thomas Soucek, who I love, but like is aging and is slowing and needs someone next to him to run if you're going to play him or play him further forward. And alongside him is Andy Irving. Now, Andy Irving is someone I saw on the Elizabeth line not too long ago, which is the train that runs through central London, my train. And 5 minutes I'm staring at him thinking, I know you. Do we go to school together? Or do you work with me? Who are you? Before I was like, oh, that's Andy Irving, West Ham squad member, because he's such a no one. It took me a while to recognise who he was. He can just get on the Elizabeth line and no one's going to know who he is. They've got Mateus Fernandes, £40 million, Magassa, £25 million, James Ward-Prowse, £30 million. They've loaned out Edson Alvarez, the Mexico captain, to Fenerbahce, I think, £30 million. They've got Freddie Potts, who was Player of the Year in the Championship for Portsmouth. All these guys, but Nuno has gone, no, I'm going to play Andy Irving. And you couple that with the fact he didn't play a striker. He played Paqueta at false 9, Somerville a winger at number 10. Like all of it. It was chaos. It was a chaotic team that made no sense. And they got beaten comfortably by Brentford, who should have been 10-0 up at half-time. We then get to Friday, and I couldn't watch the game, sadly, because my wife and her best friend are big fans of the Hunger Games. And in London, they are doing a run in Canary Wharf of the Hunger Games live, featuring John Malkovich as President Snow, though just on TV, sadly. So that was a bit of a con. But anyway, we get there, and it's like, turn your phones off. It was a great show in lots of ways. It was unwatchable because it was a story. Sorry, Tim. But like, the performance of the main girl was amazing. Anyway, they were like, turn your phone off. I was like, turn my phone off. And I come out at half-time of the show, the interval, when it's half-time in the game. And I look at my phone, I look at the team, and I was a bit like, you know when you go, I'll turn that upside down.
Yeah,
Must
yeah,
be
yeah.
wrong. I don't know what I'm looking at here.
Yeah, flip it around.
He played Irving and Soucek again. He played Wan-Bissaka left side of a defensive three, where he's never played ever. He played Ollie Scarles, the backup left back from the academy, at right wing back. He had Somerville again, not on the wing, as number 10 alongside Paqueta. Bowen the winger as the striker, and Irving and Soucek in midfield against the Leeds midfield, which they haven't got much in terms of finesse, but they've got a lot of pace and a lot of power and a lot of like tenacity, and it's home at Ellen Road, right? They're obviously down in 2 minutes because no one knew where the they were playing. Sorry, Tim. And then they concede from a corner, obviously. After
Who scored? Who scored in 2 minutes? Who's that guy that scored?
Some guy who's not going to make the World Cup. He's not even the best brother. But like, just.
Poor Brendan.
I mean, it's a great point. Like, there was a point where Brendan Aronson, who is just a blunt instrument, runs through the West Ham midfield. And like, this was happening under Potter when Nuno came in, he fixed it against Everton, and then never played that team again, and has played Irving and Souček, the slowest people he's got from the 8 possible options. And he fixed it in 25 minutes. And it's a long rant, this, but the other bit is, I'm speaking to West Ham fans locally, right? And I was quite happy to bring Nuno in because I've seen him for 10 years. I think he's very competent. He's done a great job at these other clubs. I went out a couple of nights ago and I said, what do you think to it? And I've heard this online and from multiple people now. People think Nuno threw the games. People think he threw it because he's changed his mind about being the West Ham manager, and he thinks this is the quickest way to get himself sacked, to get a Postecoglou payout. Now, that's obviously not true, right?
Jeez.
But the fact people are saying it tells you how inexplicable these teams were to do it twice. And he fixed it during the game. He's got Potts, Magassa and Fernandes. Fucking play them. Sorry, Tim. To do Irving and Souček in these very important games, I mean, that was the season in that week. After a month build-up for those 2 games with available players, and he played a team that no one on this earth would have played. Like, I don't think he'll recover, Nuno, reputationally, with West Ham fans this season, if he makes it through the season, off the strength of that. Like, what's happening? Have you ever seen someone decide, you know what I'll do? I'm going to play everyone out of position. Let's give that a whirl.
Yeah, so the only thing I can lean into is when a new manager comes in, obviously he needs to see certain things from the body language, right? It's all body language in the first couple of days. And he'll be extremely familiar with West Ham's squad until he kind of well, no, because when you're prepping for West Ham, obviously as an opponent head coach, you're going to go through the starting 11s and you're going to think about the strength of the lineup. And in the back of your mind, you're going to be like, man, what if you played him here? What if this defensive midfielder, could you play him in a hybrid of a 3 in the back when, you're in position in the build out? Could you play, your outside backs higher? Could you rotate your wingers in as kind of false 10s in moments? How could you get overloads? Like he's always going to be looking at that and like theoretically when he's watching the game being like, man, if I had that team, I'd play this guy here. Man, I think he's got the attributes to play. So he's going to be familiar. But then when he gets into training, he's going to learn about the attitudes because the body language, the attitudes, the sessions, he's going to want to push. And when I saw the 2 lineups, I'm thinking to myself, he's sending a message about competition. He's setting a message about standards. The lineup doesn't make sense. But I'm thinking to myself, why doesn't the lineup make sense? What is he seeing in these training sessions, in these small-sided games, that gives him pause to then all of a sudden play a guy like Wan-Bissaka on the left-hand side? Not that he's never played there, but why would he think this is the right time to play him there? Is there something in the overload and the buildup where he's then asking Wan-Bissaka to get on his right foot and be prolific from distance, from shots? Like, that can't be it. So, like, what is it? Is it just pure athleticism that he's asking for? That tough tackling, reach, hook slide that Wan-Bissaka has kind of trademarked. What is it about this midfield that he feels like this is a level up from what, like Souček, you understand Souček, right? Because to an extent, you're thinking of highly experienced guy that he's got the nous, right? He's got the feel, like he can sniff things out. Maybe at this age, obviously the athleticism isn't what it was maybe 2 or 3 seasons. So like I'm trying to figure this out, but Rennie, all I can stumble upon is the experience of competition. There's something in these training sessions that he's seeing right now that boils down to either you're up for the challenge or you're not up for the challenge. Because I think he's trying to suss out who are the guys that he can truly believe in, who are the guys that he can go to battle with. And maybe to your point, if I think about what the last 3 seasons have looked like, man, you've got a lot of different cultural experiences coming in and coming out of this locker room. So who's up to the standard? Who's up to the competition? Who's up to the mentality? And I'm going to be really intrigued to see what the next 3 weeks looks like, because to your point, you're right. He took a risk, and that risk completely backfired in terms of the confidence of the fan base.
Yeah, it shattered his reputation with everyone I know, including me. My confidence in him is less than 0 at this current moment. I thought he was coming in as a competent manager, and it turns out he's recently been kicked in the head by a horse. And also, and that point you make is really interesting. I want to move us on, but like the point you make about trying people out, I get that, and I think that's right, until I think about Freddie Potts, who is the son of a club legend. His brother played for the club, loves the place. He walks his dog in the park near me. He's very much entrenched in the West Ham area. There's not a fucking chance, sorry Tim, last one, on this earth that he's not putting 1000% effort in training. And he is better than Andy Irving on his worst day, who is a League Two footballer. So that's the element of it that, again, makes me just go mad. Two other quick bits. Let me ask you about Kevin De Bruyne getting injured, taking this penalty for Napoli. He scores the penalty for Napoli. They win the game in the end. But initially, it seemed like he pulled his hamstring. It looks now that it's some sort of thigh issue that's going to keep him out for months and months and months. Give us your view on how this happened, right? You played at the very top level. I can't remember ever seeing someone kicking the ball and getting injured to this degree. What's happened here?
Yeah, I went back and I watched the highlight because I wasn't watching the game, and I thought he just tore his hamstring. Like his reaction and the tears, like that's not frustration, that's pain, right? So the moment that he comes through and he strikes his technique, he's got the his technique's phenomenal. But you just wonder what he was carrying. And again, in my mind, because of the technology, because of all the, the training bras that they wear with, the little data trackers everywhere. Um, you always know, these guys that have I was looking for something I can use, their little MacBooks, and, those guys at the end of the bench, or it's sat, it's sat down on the little tripod. They're tracking all these guys, and to understand who's kind of redlining, who they need to back off a little bit, who needs some treatment, the psychology of guys going in and be like, hey, I don't feel right. I know my body really well. This is what I'm concerned about. They'll be very forthcoming. Some of the guys, and other guys will be like, yeah, I'm good. Yeah, no, totally fine. Yeah, no problem. And it's just a psychological thing. It was back in the day, concussion stuff. Like I'd get my bell rung. No, I'm not supposed to say that anymore. But I'd be like, they'd be like, yeah, you good? I'm like, yeah, of course I'm good. Because I couldn't lose my position. I wasn't good enough in my mind to be able to take 3 or 4 games off and then come back because I was afraid somebody else was. There was like a whole psychological fear-based element because I was playing for my club, but I was playing for my paycheck, and I always knew that. And I was playing against Father Time. In this moment, I wonder where he was physically heading into the game, or if this was just a one-off. If you have all of these weird moments physically and as a footballer over the course of 90 minutes that you can't really account for where something goes sideways. And it could be something as easy as like my calf is tight. And then that calf tightness then leads into something a little bit higher, front side of your quad, back side of your hamstring, all of these weird things. Like even an ankle, like, man, my ankle doesn't feel right. So all of a sudden you're protecting it a little bit more. Maybe then, you're irritating your shin muscle that then wraps around your IT band that then, like all these weird things happen. So when he did it, I thought he popped his hammy, but then watching him in real time, like go to tears and need to be carried off, I thought he ripped his hammy. It's like to the point where, it's surgery. Like you're going to be out for a while, like Bukayo Saka last January. So now to hear it's a thigh issue makes me, quadricep femoris and all those weird, like trying to specify. It's like, no, the front right side of his thigh is where he, like, that's what we're looking for. But yeah, man, scary. But again, Father Time, if you're in that early 30s to mid 30s on, I think you're either just a monster mentality animal that competes at the highest level and doesn't functionally know how to do anything other than, or man, you've been really, really lucky staying away from the injury bug. And yeah, it's been him. So I didn't see, did you see the timeline? Is it like 8 weeks, 10 weeks, or was it just kind of like undisclosed?
I read earlier it might be 4 months.
Jesus.
But that was when it changed from hamstring to thigh, and it might require surgery. I read this morning. I mean, I haven't had the confirmation on that yet, but it looks bad. It looks really bad.
Not good.
I mean, it's awful. It's such a shame for Kevin De Bruyne, who's sort of establishing himself at Napoli, but it might be good for McTominay because the moment he comes off, McTominay goes central, scores an amazing goal again. So I mean, that's going to be an interesting conversation. But I love Kevin De Bruyne. I'm gutted. I think it's such a shame.
Hey, if you want to score Champions League goals, just leave Manchester United.
That's what you got to do. That's the rules. And then put Andy Irving in midfield. The last question on this, because we'll do some more when it gets to the more interesting rounds. But MLS round 1 of the 3 has been going on. And I'm still not sure how much I like the round of 3. And it not being aggregate as well, I think is weird. In the Whitecaps thrashed Dallas 3-0, but then they go in just 1-0 up from the second one. It just, there's good elements and bad elements to it. I think second year we've been doing it. What are you making to it so far?
Yeah, listen, I'm used to it. I was saying this the other day with Tio Max Bretos, my partner, and we've got the upcoming games. We've got FC Dallas against Vancouver, and then Austin FC against LAFC, back to back, a little Texas two-step on Saturday and Sunday. Um, Listen, man, I am uniquely and organically qualified to say unceremoniously, I'm in love with what Major League Soccer does. And I know people will be like, "Oh, you're a homer, and all you do is cover it," but it's not that. I love the playoff format. I always have. I love the jeopardy involved. I love the new lease on life for teams. I love the struggle for the teams. Like, for example, what happened last year with Inter Miami against Atlanta United. How do you recalibrate knowing that these one-off games, you have to change the parameters of the way that you look at everything that's happening. And Philadelphia Union and San Diego FC are going to be the two teams that have the targets on their backs because of the consistency of performance that they respectively found in the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference. This is what I'll say. To give credit to Major League Soccer, it feels like each and every year they've added a new element, and that new element is to better what the format looks like. One of the big issues is the international window in November. There's nothing that they've ever been able to do about it. It is what it is. And as the league has got bigger and more expansive, the reality is that MLS Cup final is going to be pushed in December. That means you're going to have to play through a window. That means there's going to be a subsequent break. And that also is going to mean the threat of injury and fatigue for players going away with their respective national teams. Um, I love the format where there's the wild card. It's a one-off. In that last, jeopardy of 8, 9, who is the team that can figure out a way to wiggle their way through? It was the two teams that played at home and was as expected, even though it went a little bit sideways, but Chicago and Portland go through. Now, effectively, they've got to be on the road for the rest of the time. I think with this round of three, what's important to recognize is at the end of the day, and we can be honest about this, it's a carrot that the teams are then able to give to their ownership group and within the model say, hey, because we've earned a playoff spot, we have now earned a home playoff game. And what does that do? It roughly generates for certain teams probably about $1 million take home when it's all said and done. So, and by the way, it's something for the fans to be like, hey man, we got a home game like FC Dallas. Like, hey, we got this home game. Let's like we made the playoffs. Like this is great. Let's go support our team, even though theoretically heading into the match, it's done and dusted because of the way Thomas Muller and Sebastian Berhalter and everyone's playing right now for Vancouver. At least we get to enjoy our team making the playoffs. So yeah, round of one so far. I thought Miami was fantastic against Nashville. Cincinnati was just grinding last night against the Columbus Crew. The Chicago Philly game was fascinating because we thought Philly was in full control. We saw some glimpses of some elements that they should be concerned about heading into Chicago after they were pushed to penalties. San Diego was just really, really dominant. I'm unsure of why Phil Neville felt the need to point out Chris Penso in the way that he did in the post match. He seems to always toe the line where he wants to blame the referee without publicly blaming the referee so he doesn't get a fine, which is surprising the frequency in which he's gotten away from it, considering Don Garber and MLS come down so heavy-handed. Minnesota Seattle was a grind, as I expect. This is going to be the one where I'm unsure who to pick because the style of play are not similar at all, but both teams are probably destined for penalties the same way Minnesota got past Real Salt Lake last year. LAFC Austin. Austin's going to sit in that low, 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 low block and hit for transition moments and play for set pieces. Danny Bouanga and Sonny are going to pull apart defenders, but again, it's not going to be big margins. And Vancouver's proven that they look like a serious heavyweight in the Western Conference. So it's really, in Charlotte FC, NYCFC, we haven't seen yet. But with Wilfred Zaha finally picking up a red card, a second yellow for putting hands to face, neck, chirping all the time, talking in third person. He's such a good player, and I don't understand why the ego has to get so heavily involved at times. But Dean Smith is just in full protection mode. He's ignoring the obvious for all of the obvious reasons. So yeah, I mean, right now I think Miami and Vancouver, without LAFC playing, have shown that they are the two teams that are the outliers in terms of kind of excellence above and beyond right now. And it's hard to see those two teams not figuring out a way, again, without LAFC playing Austin yet, not figuring out a way to manufacture an opportunity at an MLS Cup final.
Yeah, not confident in Columbus in that second leg against Cincinnati. They look very, very short.
But by the way, you and I have a soft spot for Columbus Crew for different reasons. We have to recalibrate.
Yeah.
It's not what Columbus Crew are not what they were the last couple of seasons. They just aren't.
Can't lose a star player like that.
And
Can't lose
losing
a star
Cucho and Gazdag has been nowhere close statistically to what we thought was coming in. Darlington Agby's on his way out. I still think there's been a disservice to the conversation about the loss of Aiden Morse. He's been phenomenal for Middlesbrough. He was even that much more important to Columbus. That's been a big hole. It's just different. It looks different. It feels different. It's still Wilfred Nancy and the way that he wants to play the game. He just doesn't have the difference makers to compete the way he competed these last couple of seasons.
Yeah, uphill task against Cincinnati in that second game in a few days. Dunny, we're out of time. What a pleasure, as ever. Thank you very much indeed. And we got through that whole show without talking about Man United, which I think is great for everyone.
Only one
involved,
reference.
because you didn't want to do it when they were crap, so we're not going to do it when they're good.
By the way, did I send you the I don't know if it's a TikTok or a YouTube. It was like Manchester United fans after 3 consecutive wins, and it was a guy pulling himself out from underneath the bed, and he was like looking around and was like, can we come out now, like that? And then a guy like pops out of the closet and another guy's like slowly like peeking around a tree. I just thought it was brilliant because that basically shows you the insecurities of all Manchester United fans right now.
Shows you how weak they are because they don't know pain. Anyway, that's Brian Dunseth over there.
One game a week, baby.
Tim Horsey produced the program. It's Week in the Tackle. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.